All right, so starting off on number 1 here, they want us to write the point-slope form of the equation, and they give us the slope as 9. So I'm going to say, and then the point here. So I always say y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. And so I'm just going to kind of plug and chug here. So y minus 5 equals 9 times x minus 2, and you shouldn't have to do anything after that. There you are done. All right, next up here, it says a horizontal line. The slope of a horizontal line. So the slope of a horizontal line is always 0. And the equation of the horizontal line passing through this point, if you ever get stuck on this, I kind of always like to visualize it here. So we have a horizontal line going through 1, 3. And I just think about what's kind of always the same here. So if you look at this point, 1, 3, and then 2, 3, 3, 3, you'll notice x keeps changing, but y is always 3. And so we say there y equals 3. All right, next up here we have a vertical line, and a vertical line is always undefined slope. And then passing through 2, 4, once again, you can kind of visualize this vertical line going there. And you can think about the points 2, 4, whatever, 2, 2, 2, negative 2. You'll notice that now y keeps changing, but x is always 2. So we say x equals 2 for that. All right, next up here. I'm going to find the equation of the line, so I would first just find the slope. So m equals, and then we'll subtract the y values on top, subtract the x values on bottom in the same order. So that's going to become 3 over negative 1, so negative 3 for my slope. And then I would use point-slope form. So I'll use the first point. You can really use either one, so I'll say y minus 3 equals m times x minus 4. You might be able to put it like that. If not, you can go ahead and distribute this and turn it into slope-intercept form. So you can call it negative 3x plus 12, and then add the 3. So y equals negative 3x plus 15, and that should work if the first version does not. All right, next up here, we want the equation through the line with this point. With these conditions, it gives me the x and the y-intercept. Now, the way I always think of this is kind of just as 2 points. So the x-intercept is negative 10, 0, while the y-intercept is 0, 6. So then I would use, just find the slope. So it's y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. I've got to be careful about that minus to plus on bottom. So it's going to give me 3 over 5. And then I actually already know here that b is 6 because of that y-intercept there, it says. So I'm going to say y equals 3 over 5x plus 6. I'll just use y equals mx plus b. All right, next up here we got a perpendicular line. And so perpendicular to this line would mean that my slope is going to be the opposite reciprocal of theirs. So their slope is negative 1/3, then mine is positive 3 over 1. And I'm going to go through this point. So I'm going to do the point slope form here. So I'm going to say y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. And since that x is negative, I'm just going to switch it to plus 2. All right, and then I'm going to go ahead and you may be able to type that in once again. That's correct for the point slope form, but if it doesn't like that, you can go ahead and distribute here. So I call it 3x plus 6, and then add the 2 over. So y equals 3x plus 8. All right, next up here, they give me the y-intercept, so I already know that my b is 1. And it says it's parallel to this line. Now I would get this line into mx plus b, so I would move these guys over. So 3y equals negative 2x minus 4, then divide by 3. So the slope is going to be negative 2/3, since parallel means same slope. I'm not going to change that. I'm going to ignore the y-intercept, though. That's not going to be part of my answer. So I'm just going to grab this piece of information and this piece of information. We'll say y equals negative 2/3 x plus 1. All right, next up here, it says it's going through this point and perpendicular line y equals 6. Now I know y equals 6 is a horizontal line. So if you want to kind of draw this to help visualize it, y equals 6 would be right here. But we're going to be perpendicular to that, and I can see that if we're going to go through 7, 6, would be going this way, so that would be a vertical line. Now I know that a vertical line is always x equals a number, and I see that my x value there is 7, so I'm going to say x equals 7 for that one. All right, next up here, we got a little word problem. So first of all, it says If he produces X toasters a month, his production cost is given by the equation. So we get 8x plus 3,000. And so the graph on that, to me, it looks pretty obvious to be that one. I see that y-intercept at 3,000, and really it has a positive slope as opposed to the option up here, which has a negative slope, which is decreasing. So the slope right there, what does it represent? So I would say that since this X toaster ovens, that means that each toaster oven costs $8 to make, because every time I make another one, it's going to increase by 8. And then the y-intercept would be it would be some initial cost, and sometimes this is like the fixed cost, because that's kind of how much it costs for the machines and the setup and everything else, not other than just producing each toaster. So how much I'm already spending before I even produced any toasters. All right, next up here, this problem, it says that the recommended adult dosage is D, then the child dosage is given by this formula. So for this one, they said the adult dosage was 300. I'm actually going to plug that in there for D, and so that is going to give me, let's see, 300 times 0.0417. So it's going to be 12.51a plus 12.51. And so obviously 12.51 would be the slope. And then what does the slope represent? And so let's see, what is child's age A? And so that is the the child's age would be in years, so I would say it's the increase in dosage for each 1 year increase in the child's age. So that means after 1 year, it's going to be 12.51 more than it was in the previous year. And then the dosage for newborn would be A equals 0, because when you're a newborn, you're actually 0 years old. You haven't kind of lived at all. So we would plug in 0 there for A, and that would actually also give us 12.51. All right, next up here, it says the business buys a computer for $2,900. So I would say that's right away. I can tell that's the B, because that's the starting point is $2,900. And then after 4 years, the value is expected to be $200. So I'd say that's a point, 4 comma 200. Now remember that the B is also a point, so it'll be 0 comma 2,900. So I can use that to find the slope. So 2,900 minus 200 over 0 minus 4. Going to give me 2,700 over negative 4. And so that'll be a negative 675. Now it says I need to do value and time. So I'm going to say value equals negative 675 times t plus 2,900. So that's saying we're starting at 2,900, and then every year we're going to drop by $675. All right, next up here it says at the surface of the ocean, the water pressure is the same as the air pressure. It's 15 pounds. And then below the surface, the water pressure increases by 4.34 for every 10 feet of descent. And so find an equation for the relationship between the pressure and the depth. And so what I'm going to say here is that this is actually our beginning, because when we start diving, we're already at 15. And then this one is kind of slope, but it's kind of not. And so the way I would think of this is that this one is at 0 feet, we're at 15, and then it says if we increase by 10, then it will go up by 4.34. So it's actually going to be 19.34, because we get that 4.34 more than it was at 0. So I'm adding that to the 15 to give me what it is at 10 feet under. So those would be my 2 points, and so I'll let you guys take it from there. All right, next up here, it says the monthly cost of the car depends on a number of miles driven. And so since the cost is dependent, I would say that that's going to be our y value, and the miles is going to be our, actually it's d for distance is going to be our x value. And so they're giving me 2 points here. So my 2 points are 240 miles is costing $320. and then 800 miles is costing 460. So with that, I would go ahead and find the slope. So we could say m equals 460 minus 320 over 800 minus 240. So this would be 140 over 560. And 140 divided by 560 is 1 over 4. And so I would say y minus, I would use a point slope here. So y minus 320 equals 1/4 times x minus 240. If it doesn't like that, you can go ahead and distribute in here. So say 1/4 x, 240 divided by 4 is 60, equals y minus 320. We can add that 320 over. So you get y equals 1/4 x plus 260. All right, next up here, they give us a function, and then they're asking us to evaluate it at a couple different spots here. So first of all, f of 0 means plug in 0 for all the x's. This one's going to be 0 squared plus 9 times 0. I think that's pretty obvious. It's going to come out to 0. And so you just kind of do that along the way here. I'll let you do the other numbers. And so next up, though, for a, this would be a squared plus 9 times a. And so that one just simplifies to a squared plus 9a. We don't want to factor there because to simplify is actually to get rid of parentheses. So I would just leave it like that. Next one here is negative x squared plus 9 times negative x. Now, the interesting thing on this one is that negative x in parentheses squared, actually we can write as positive x squared, because anytime you square something, it's going to turn positive. And then I'm going to have to write negative 9x for the 9 times negative x. Last up here, this one would be 1 over a squared plus 9 times 1 over a. I would just simplify that to say 1 over a squared plus 9 over a. Now that looks like a over a, so I'll make sure I'm clear there, 9 over a. You could do a common denominator there if you wanted to say 1 plus 9a all over a squared. I think that would be correct also. I would take either one of those. All right, next up here on number 18, I just wanted to highlight a couple of these. I guess let's do this one. So this would be negative rad 7 squared minus 7 times rad 7 plus 8. Now, on this one, the PEMDAS says that we should do rad 7 squared first, which is 7, and then make that negative. So it's it's different than if the negative was inside, and then this would be minus 7 rad 7, and then plus 8. So I would just simplify that to say 1 minus 7 rad 7. The other one I wanted to do, or the next one I wanted to do is this one. So this one would be negative parentheses a plus 7 squared minus 7 times a plus 7 plus 8. And so on this one, we're going to have to FOIL together a plus 7, and I know there's a negative out there as well. I would always recommend distributing that after. So it's going to become negative parentheses a squared plus 7a, and 7a makes 14a plus 49. And then I would distribute that as negative a squared minus 14a minus 49. And then I would go ahead and bring these other guys down that I've kind of been ignoring up here. I'll go ahead and distribute that and call that negative 7a minus 49, and then plus 8. All right, so now I'll combine like terms. So I get negative a squared minus 14 and minus 7. It's going to give me minus 21a. And then minus 49 will give me negative 98, but then plus 8 is actually going to give me negative 90. So that's my answer right there. For k of negative x here, it's going to be negative x squared minus 7 times negative x plus 8. Really important on this one, we cannot go minus to plus because there's the exponent there. So I have to do negative x squared, which is actually x squared. And if I make that negative, it's going to be negative x squared. And this will be plus 7x plus 8. All right, next up here we got a piecewise function, and so it's a function cut into pieces, and so I first kind of need to decide each number here, so I'll start with -4, which category it fits into. So -4 is less than -1, and so that means I actually plug it in here for x over here. And so I evaluate that, so it's 16 minus 8, and so that's 8. -3 over 2 as -1.5 is also less than -1. So I'll plug that in here as well. So it's going to be 9 over 4 positive, and then these will actually cancel out, and then that'll give me -3 over 1. However, I would kind of change that into minus 12 over 4, and so that's going to give me -3 over 4. So I'll write that in blue. All right. Now, next one here, -1, you can actually see it's kind of right on the border between the top and the middle. So whenever that happens, we always go where it's or equal to. So it's equal to -1, so I'm going back in that same function here. So -1 squared plus 2 times -1. So it's 1 minus 2, so it'll be -1. Now 0, you can see, is now obviously in between -1 and 1. So now I'm going to plug it into this function, which is just x, and so that's just 0. And then 30, you can see, is obviously greater than 1. So I plugged into this function, but this one has nowhere to plug it into. Since there's no x, that just means any number I plugged into that piece would come out as -1. All right, next up here, we have another function, and it asks us for two different things here. And so these answers are going to be different. So the first thing it asks for is f of x plus 2. And so that means that we need to go into the function and plug in an x plus 2 in for x. And so you can see I just replaced that x with x plus 2. It's still being squared and then multiplied by 5 and then adding 4. Now I need to simplify this, so I'm going to write it twice, and then we're going to FOIL it. So it's going to become x squared plus 2x is 4x plus 4. And then we will go ahead and distribute that 5. And just combine like terms. All right, now this is different than the second one, f of x plus f of 2, because that just means what we're going to do is not plug in anything the first time. That's f of x. And then add that to whatever happens when we plug in a 2. So we see those two as separate here and there in the two parentheses. And so 2 squared is 4. 4 times 5 is 20. And then plus 4 is 24. And then this one's kind of already done, so now I'll just combine like terms and say that that's 5x squared plus 28. All right, this question, kind of like the last one, we have two different questions, so we should have two different answers. The first one is asking you to plug in 2x, and the second one's asking you to multiply the whole function by 2. So I would just rewrite the function and multiply it all by 2. So I'll let you guys simplify those. All right, once again here, two different questions. The first one is just asking me to plug in an x squared in for x, and so that one's actually pretty simple. The second one is asking me to square the whole function, and so I would have to write it twice and do a little FOIL. And one last time here with the two different questions. The first one is asking me to plug in x over 3 in for x. And so I would say that that's 2x minus 21, whereas the second one is asking me to take the whole function and divide it by 3. Now I can divide both of those individually, which gives me 2x minus 7.